Hello everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to start off with a few questions. So how many of y'all have been birding before? Okay. How many of you have been birding in winter specifically? Those of you that have been birding. Okay. And then how many of you would like to know how to bird watch in winter? Because it's a little different than summer. Perfect. That's why we're here today, right? Okay. So not all birds migrate south for winter, as I'm sure we all are aware, being in Stevens Point, right? But we actually have quite a few birds that remain here in Schmeeckle over the winter. So today we are going to talk about which of those birds stay here in the winter, just a few of them. We're going to talk about how we can ID them using the way they look and some of the beautiful calls that they have. And then we are also going to talk about what you can do to be a successful bird watcher in winter. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. Our first bird, I'm going to introduce a few of the birds to you today. So the first one we have, let's see if we can stay awake. We did not. Okay. There we go. All right. So our first bird that we are going to talk about today is this one. Does anybody know what bird this is? Hope so, at least some of us. Yeah, go ahead.
A chickadee.
It is. Do you know what kind of chickadee specifically?
I'm going to pass it on.
All right.
Black cap.
It is a black-capped chickadee, yeah. So our black-capped chickadee is very common, especially here in Schmeeckle, but just in the Midwest in general. They are one that you see a lot out in winter. And they're easily identified by this black cap that they have on top. They're a pretty small bird, not much bigger than my fist. And they are found in open woods and along the forest edge. And then they will avoid coniferous stands, which what that means would be a coniferous tree, like your Christmas tree, a pine tree usually, and they do not lose their leaves or needles in winter. And then a stand would be just an area of a forest that is specifically that one tree type. So they choose to avoid coniferous stands. They like maples, oaks, deciduous trees like that. So, but these birds will eat insects, insect eggs, insect pupa, smaller seeds and berries, and then they will actually eat the fat of dead animals as well. Which is kind of a weird fact that I definitely didn't know it. So, yeah, so this is how our chickadees are going to survive in winter, especially if there's not a lot of seeds and berries available. They'll scavenge for like that dead animal fat to eat as well. So, then we have our next bird. Does anybody recognize this bird? Yeah.
Is it a hairy woodpecker?
It's not a hairy woodpecker, but it's close. They do look very similar. Yeah. Did you know? Were you raising your hand? Oh, okay. Anyone? Any guesses? Yeah.
Is it downy?
It is a downy. Yeah. So this one is going to be a downy woodpecker, and an easier way to identify them is going to be by these spots along their wings. And then they have this little red spot at the back of their head. And they're smaller than a pileated woodpecker, if anyone knows what that one looks like. They've got a big red head, and they're a bit bigger. So they're a little downy woodpecker. And they're going to be a bit more of an acrobatic bird. So they're going to be hanging upside down on branches and tree limbs. And in winter, they'll do a lot more excavating to get their food. So they'll drill farther into a tree to get to the insects that are overwintering inside the tree, the wood of the tree. And they are found pretty much wherever there are trees available for them, so they can be found in your backyard, in forested areas, but they generally favor a deciduous tree. And like I mentioned earlier, that's going to be a tree like your oak or your maple tree that loses its leaves in the winter. There's our downy. The next one is going to be this bird. This one's not as common. Does anyone know what bird this one might be? Any thoughts? Does my assistant want to help out here? Do you remember? Oh.
Is it a house finch?
It is not a house finch. It does look like a finch, but it's not quite. Yeah, so this is going to be, this is a common redpoll. They're not as common to see, but when they do show up in an area, they show up in abundance. They usually travel in big groups almost like a flock. And they're identifiable by this red stain across their face, which is kind of how they get that red pole name. And they're also a very small bird, and so they do stick together to help stay warm and stay protected in those bigger groups. And they are going to be found in woodland areas and along bushy field areas. And they actually, so because they're such a small bird, a lot of scientists have kind of wondered, how are they surviving so well through winter? Because if you look at kind of like their range maps of like where they prefer to be, they do prefer to be farther north in colder areas. And so they have this really cool adaptation that allows them to digest their food slower throughout the days, so they don't have to scavenge for their food as frequently as some other birds do. So they have this pouch in their throat where they can store their food. So they'll go out in the freezing cold, in the wind, in the weather, right? And they'll eat and eat, stuff themselves full, and then just fill that pouch up with food. And then they will go back to the safety of their shelters, where it's nice and warm and protected from all of the elements. And they will just slowly digest that food so they can stay in that protected area for as long as possible. So, pretty cool adaptation for these little guys. And the last bird we're going to go over is going to be our cedar waxwing. Has anybody seen this bird? Yeah, they're really, really beautiful birds with all the bright colors, right? So they are going to be found in wooded and semi-open areas, and they absolutely love berries, like top food that they prefer to eat. And one of these berries actually can affect the way that their tail feathers look. So if you look in this photo, and it's a little bit cut off, but they have these yellow tips to their tail feathers. And there's actually a berry from the invasive honeysuckle that is a super pigmented berry, and they really, really love to eat these berries. And it can actually turn those little yellow spots like an orange color from the dye, like the pigment in those berries. So if you see a bird that looks just like this but it's orange, it's usually also a cedar waxwing. It just really decided that the honeysuckle berries were quite delectable that year. So just a little ID tip there, and then they've got this little black mask almost. That's a good identifiable feature. But they are pretty sociable birds. And they usually don't actually defend their territory from each other because they like to live in a more community type setting. So with that, we've kind of seen all the birds, right? And then we're going to talk about to ID them. It can be pretty difficult to figure out, like, okay, I've seen all these birds, right? How the heck am I going to remember what each of these looks like to go with the name? So there's actually been research done that shows that drawing or painting a bird or a duck or really any creature for identification is super helpful for your brain to like remember it, and like creating those colors to make it look as realistic as possible can really help solidify in your mind what that bird looks like. So we don't have time to have everyone draw a bird today, but I did print out some coloring pages. So those are going to be in the back. There's one of each bird. And in a moment I'll have you get up and grab whichever one you would like. And then my assistant will pass around some colored pencils and crayons. And we're just going to take some time, and you can choose any one of the birds to color. And I challenge you to make it look as realistic as possible. In the end, if you want to make your cedar waxwing bright purple, I'm not going to stop you. That is your creative freedom. So you can do whatever you would like with that. But we are going to do that for a few minutes. So you can all, the coloring pages are just back behind, kind of where you picked up all your little evaluation sheets. That's what I was looking for. So you can all go get those, and then Kate and I will pass out the pencils. And I have what each of the birds looks like up on the board. So. Because that is another great way to ID birds, and it's actually sometimes easier if you aren't able to see the birds. I'm really bad at finding, like spotting the birds, and so like being able to hear them is super helpful, and I've definitely heard more birds than I've seen. So, but we are going to talk about chickadees. And our chickadees have two distinct calls that we're going to go over. So the first one sounds like this. Alright, so this call is kind of how they get their name. It sounds like that chickadee sound, right? And so this call, there's actually a lot of research that's gone into what each call from a chickadee means. They're one of a few that I know of that like we can distinctly say like this call definitely means this. So for chickadees, this call is kind of an alarm sound. So the more D's you hear at the end, I don't know if you heard this one had like 3 or 4 at the end of like the chickadee, right? And so the more D's at the end, the higher the alarm is. So they will make this call with all those D's at the end to kind of signify to the others around them that there's danger coming, there's something that doesn't feel quite right around. So the more D's, the higher the alarm there is. And then to signal that everything is all good, all safe, they'll just do a single chickadee sound. So they're just the one D, and that kind of signifies that, okay, it's all good, you can all come out now. We're going to be okay. And then their second call is a bit, it's one that I really associate with winter. When I hear it, it just kind of like brings me to like, I know this little place in my mind, but I'll play it here. Alright, so that one is a phoebe. And so that one is made mainly by male chickadees, and they use that to attract females, signify that they are ready to mate. So it's kind of like their mating call. And then they can also use it to signal aggression. So they kind of do it to ward off other males if they've found a lady that they want to get with, right? So that's one I hear a lot in winter, especially if it's like all quiet out in the woods, like fresh snowfall. Just hearing that sound to me is like very like winter-esque. So it's fun. But yeah, so the chickadee calls are very, very researched, heavily know what each call means. For our downy woodpeckers, they actually use their drumming on the tree is one of their like calls, if you will. They do use it to communicate. So that could sound like this. Alright, so both males and females will use drumming as a way to communicate with each other. They will do it to attract mates and mostly to attract mates and kind of to signify kind of where they are in the woods, to find each other, and then also to find food, of course. But they do kind of do that drumming also for communication. And then the only other like kind of call that downy woodpeckers make is going to be like a pick sound, and I'll play that in just a moment. But our downy woodpeckers are not as vocally adept as a lot of other birds are. So they only have these 2 ways of communicating with each other. So the next one is going to sound like this. There we go. So that pick sound can be a few different things. Mostly it's excitement. If a woodpecker is very, very excited, they'll make that noise. And it's just like, I'm here and I'm happy and I'm having a really good time, and you should all know that, right? And then it's also sometimes for alarm as well. If they're feeling threatened or something, they might also make that to kind of warn others around them, or even try to warn off a predator. Usually not likely, but occasionally they will do that if they think that it might actually work. But those are really the only 2 distinct calls that a downy woodpecker will make. And again, it's because they are not as developed in that area. So then for our dove there are 3 different calls that they are making. And there's not a whole lot of research done onto what each different one means, but it is good to hear them and to know, to be able to identify them by their sound. So we're going to go over 3 of those. So the first one is going to be a more snapping sound. Be like this. So it's very faint, but in the background you can kind of hear some of the other birds chattering around. I don't know if anybody in the back did, but standing up here, I guess right by the speaker, I can kind of hear that. And that is, again, those birds are always going to be found really closely together, and usually not by themselves. So they'll be making those sounds all together, but that was the first one. The next one is going to be more of a nasal sounding call. So that'll sound like this. Alright, and so that one is a bit more frequently heard, and it's much more loud, and to me it sounds a bit more alarming, but again, there's not a whole bunch of research done to figure out what each of those calls might mean. And then the last one that is made by our common redpoll is going to be more of like a rattle or trill sound. So, I mean, we can kind of speculate what we think each of these calls might be for, depending on how each person interprets what that sound means to them. Could change what we think it means for the birds, but until more research is done, there's really no saying like what exactly they're meaning when they do each of those individual calls. They are communicating somehow, right? So then, last one is going to be our cedar waxwing. So they have 2 different calls. And they don't really have a distinct call for like to defend their territory or to attract mates, because they are very sociable birds year-round, and so they don't have a need to defend their territory from each other. And then they don't need to attract mates with a call necessarily. They have different ways of doing that than other songbirds do. So the first one is going to be a Z sound, sound like this. And then the second one is going to be more like a sighing whistle sound, which is a bit more calming to me at least. Remembered all of these. We're going to play a little game. You can kind of either group up together or do it individually, however you choose. But I'll have some slides. We'll go through a couple. I think it's like 4 that you'll have to guess. So I'll play the sound, and then when you think you know what it is, you can raise your hand or just shout it out, whichever you would choose, whichever you're more comfortable doing. So whenever we're ready, I'll go on to that.
I like looking at this. There's no competition. Okay.
All right. So our first sound is going to play in 3, 2, 1. Oh, what do you got? Chickadee? Yeah. Okay. What kind of chickadee?
Blackhead.
Yeah. There we go. Perfect. Yeah.
Is it only black-capped chickadee that makes that sound?
I don't actually know. Does my assistant? What?
They have different calls.
Okay, there we go. They have different calls. Thank you. All right. So our next sound will play in. Oh, look at that chickadee. Wow. All right. Our next one.
Red hole.
Do you think you got it?
Red hole.
All right. Let's see if you're correct. It is the red hole. Yay.
No, you too.
You knew what it was. All right, and then the next one in 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
The woodpecker.
Yeah. Do you remember what kind of woodpecker?
Downy.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yep. So that is going to be our downy woodpecker. Does anyone remember what this sound signifies for a downy woodpecker?
They're excited.
Yeah. Really excited.
What do they get excited about? I wonder if like they find a bug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a ribbon. Yeah, like you know how like tree people or the foresters will tie ribbons on trees. Maybe they see them and they're like,
So real.
Is it like when you put it?
Like house decor.
Yeah.
They're like, wow.
Oh, this is gonna look so good in my living room.
Parade of homes. True.
All right. And this will be the last one here.
Ah.
Yeah.
Cedar waxwing.
It is a cedar waxwing. Yeah. And they are very, very gorgeous birds. They're smaller than I thought they were, honestly. I saw one up close in like a little taxidermy, and it's like not much bigger than like your hand, my hand. Yeah. So in this picture, he looks like
Blue jay size.
pretty bird, right? Yeah. So for the next part, we are actually going to head over into the bird room. So you can leave your jackets and things here. We will come back before the end of the program. But if you want to stand up, I'll kind of lead you in. Is everyone all right if I leave the lights off in the bird room to walk in? It's a little dark. So there's some flying squirrels.
There's so many. He's so cute.
Okay, this has been my favorite program. I mean, good call. I mean, all right. Watching them. I've been told that their home is actually in this church. That's what I've been told. I don't know how true it is.
Or if it's prime real estate.
It is. Sorry, I thought you were
Oh, no.
But yeah, that's what I've been told. I don't know how true it is, but the grad student told me, so I think she knows her stuff.
So cute.
They're very cute. So, squirrel watching is fun. Bird watching is also a good time. In the bird watching room here at Schmeeckle, we can turn the lights on if you want, or we can just keep watching the squirrels in the darkness. Up to y'all. Darkness. Okay, darkness it is. We do have little baskets of bird guides, so you can come in here whenever Schmeeckle is open, which is 9 to 5 p.m., 9 to 4. Yep. So you can come into the bird room, you can sit and watch. It's a really good place to sit in the winter, especially because it is heated. So you can stay nice and toasty, you don't have to go out into the cold. And then, like I said, there are these bird guides, which are super easy to use. And you can use them either to learn about new birds, or if you see a bird and you don't recognize it, you can try to find it in one of these bird guide books. And then there is a pair of binoculars here on the windowsill that you can use. But binoculars are super useful with bird watching, summer or winter, whatever the season. And you don't have to get a super expensive pair to see something cool. The more expensive, the clearer, and the farther you'll be able to see, of course. But it's not a requirement. And a super important part about bird watching in winter is that you're going to want to dress warmly and comfortably. So avoiding things like cotton is good, because if you do get warm and a little sweaty as you're walking out to where you want to be, then that cotton is going to absorb all that moisture, and you'll be cold in about 5 to 10 minutes after you stop moving. So, making sure you're dressing in layers is good. good. Making sure that you're wearing comfortable clothing too, because a lot of the times you'll have to sit still for extended periods of time in order to let the birds know that the area is safe again, and so they can come back out. And also finding a place that's kind of sheltered from the elements and the wind for yourself is good. And areas where the birds might actually be. So, and depending on what your bird you're looking for, it's going to look different. So if you're looking for like waterfowl or like cranes, things like that, you'll want to go by a body of water, because they do, like ones that don't migrate south will find bodies of water that aren't freezing over, and they will hang out there for the winter. Otherwise, bird feeders are a good place to look, whether it's here in Schmeeckle, in your backyard. Sometimes restaurants or like cafes will have bird feeders in areas that birds will frequent. And in winter, those are really good places to look because food is more scarce, and so any chance they can have an easy meal, they will find it, right? So with that, I think that about wraps up everything that I wanted to talk about. Squirrels are very entertaining.
They're so fast.
They are. They're so cute. Yeah. So yeah, bird watching in winter can be very difficult, but with the right tools and the information. Oh, there are tools that you can have on your phone that are super useful. So when earlier I mentioned that I've heard more birds than I've seen. I am not like a super expert birder. I have an app on my phone called the Merlin Bird ID app, and it allows me to hit record, and it'll record the sounds around me, and it'll pick up those bird calls, and then based on, you can download different data packs or area packs based on the area that you're in, and they can find those birds based on their call and like kind of where you are in the world. And they've got quite an expansive set of packs that you can get for all over the world. So that's a super useful tool to have. There are also like iNaturalist is a good one, because that allows you to take photos of a bird or a plant or whatever it may be, and it can usually get pretty close to a full species identification. So those are both good tools. They're free, which is always a bonus, right? And then getting out to community events, like there is the Christmas bird watch, Christmas bird count, which is a good community thing where you can contribute to citizen science. You can meet other birders in your area, things like that. And then also Project Feeder Watch is a good one, similar concept. And those are both nationwide things. There are local ones, and if you want to know more about those, you can of course come to me afterwards. I don't want to take up everyone's time. I know it's getting close to the end here. So with that, we can head back into the meeting room. As much fun it is to watch squirrels. Yeah. All right. So I hope you all had fun. I know the squirrels were a good bonus. I was really hoping they would be out there. So that was good. Nature worked in my favor today. But bird watching in winter can be a very challenging and cold activity. But with the right tools and information, it can be a wonderful winter hobby. It doesn't have to be super strenuous. If you don't want to, you can make it as easy or difficult as you would like. You could stay in your car. You could come to the bird room. You could go hike out into the middle of nowhere. It is all up to you. So I hope you all learned something new today. And as you're walking through Schmeeckle this winter or anywhere else, I encourage you to look for the birds that we saw today, listen for them, maybe do a bit of research of your own to find out about new birds, birds you might not know, or learn more about the ones that you do know. With that, though, I think we're gonna wrap it up. I hope you all enjoyed. And if you have any other questions for me, or you want to tell any stories, I'll be here for a little while after the program. And then we do have some surveys at the back of the room, just to kind of gather research about how people found out about our programs, and you know why you're here. So there should be enough for everyone to fill out, just to add to our research. So with that, have a wonderful night, and thank you all for coming.